So how are you doing, Andy?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
All good weekend.
So before we get stuck into your rugby and life story, then, mate, where was home for you as a kid, and who lived at home with you?
Yeah, well, I'm from over in Leigh, so God's own country, as they say. But yeah, it was myself and my mum and dad and my brother, my younger brother. We grew up in Wesley, part of Leigh over there in that part of the town, and yeah, that's what I called home as a young lad.
Lucky to get you on them, really, mate. I'm not. You'd have hated us back in the day. So how was rugby introduced to you, and where was it?
My first memories of rugby, and it was my dad that got me into it. My first memories were going down to the old Hilton Park at Leigh, and
Yeah,
back in the day, there, my grandmother, she actually knitted me a red and white oops, cherry and white shirt, And my first memories of going down there were being lifted. Them days, you didn't go through turnstile. Your dad lifted you over him. I was probably only about 4 years of age, and he used to lift me over, and that's my very first memories, yeah, of the game. And obviously, in them days, when you're that age and that size, you don't recall much of it. Just everybody's huge, aren't they? You know what I mean? Because
yeah.
you're small.
Especially in the cow sheds as well, innit? Yeah,
That was it, yeah. So
yeah.
I do have vague recollections of being on the terraces and going to away games as well. Probably as he got a bit older, I do remember some of the old grounds, that are no longer with us.
Yeah. And with you going to Leigh, would it be right that Leigh East was sort of on the horizon? Because they used to sort of, not ground share, but they were on the same sort of premises, weren't they? Bar and a car park.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, my memory goes back to a point where the Hilton Park was. There's a B&Q that still remains. The ground's not there, but my memory goes far enough back to the B&Q actually being a training ground. So at one time you had the training ground, you had the main stadium, and then, as you said, just a little bit further along was the old Leigh East site as well. Yeah.
Right, mate. So was it ever something you took up as a kid? Did you take it serious, or was it social for you out?
Yeah, I think probably, memory going back to when you first start playing and you get introduced to the game. In this particular town in Leigh, it's the be all and end all. It's a rugby town, so you take it serious. Whether you want to or not. It's a serious thing. If you go down to Miners or Leigh East, it's a serious thing, even from an early age. Because it's changed a little bit in this day and age where there's more of a fun element, but I think it was all about winning from as soon as you could pick
Yeah,
a ball up, you wanted to win, didn't you? So
yeah,
certainly, yeah, I enjoyed the game growing up and played a lot of junior rugby and something that, only fond memories of really, no bad memories. And yeah, it was something that you took seriously because it was, it wasn't, again, not like the modern day where you've got Xboxes and you've got live television with Premiership football on. You literally
yeah.
look forward to your game on a Sunday morning and then go and watching a game on the Sunday afternoon, didn't you?
Yeah, no, that was it. It was the talk of the week, mate. School was, without being rude, was a little bit of a sideshow, wasn't it? And all the talk was to the weekend.
Well, that was it. All your mates, the same lads that you were friends with at school, were the lads you went to. Either, we were minors. I was black and white, yellow and black, I should say. So it was sort of split. Half the lads would play at East, half the lads would play at Rangers, and yeah, they were all the same lads that you were in the same class with, that you
Yeah,
played with at the weekend and you trained with, and obviously, there was a school further down the road, and same again, it was a bit of a mix, Eastern Miners lads. So it was literally, yeah, you talked about it all week, you played, you trained, and it was a way of life, really, wasn't it?
yeah, it was. The Monday was about the last result. The Tuesday onwards is about next week, wasn't it? That's how it was. Yeah.
It was, yeah.
So was there a town team element when you played, mate? And was it an option for you?
There was, yeah. I remember going down there again on the facility that you mentioned earlier. The town team trials, the Leigh town team, were always on Leigh East ground, just at the side of
Yeah,
Hilton Park. So I remember getting sent down there. It was Mr. Fallon at 12 Apostles who he coached the rugby team. He was probably what you'd class as your first coach, and he sent us down. A handful of us was probably 4 or 5 lads for trials with the Leigh Town team as it was then, and then you were sort of, that was probably your first interaction with some of the better players from other schools, and then the makings of some of those lads who they would go on to big things in the game. Some of them lads who got selected to the town team. So that's the first real interaction you have with the best from other schools, because up until then you're just playing with your own mates, aren't you?
Yeah, like your club games, isn't it? And
yeah,
I'm guessing when up until a certain age, I don't know if it was similar to you, there isn't such a league system, is that it's like a pool, isn't it? So you play the similar teams regularly. There's no real standings until you're at an age group.
I think from my memory, it was literally just Leigh against Wigan. Always with town team games, or the main ones, or the ones that were always talked about with the Leigh versus Wigan. Because at that time, in that age group, I was sort of same age as your Sean Longs of the world. So, and then Craig Dean, who I don't really remember, he went on to play at Halifax and at Leigh and had a successful pro career. So there was some real good talent at that age group, and that was where you'd sort of go head to head against your best in your town against the best in another town, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So not long after me, mate, they merged, and it was a bit of a baffle to me, because Leigh definitely had a team good enough to stand on their own, and obviously Wigan did. And how would that have happened? Like, how would that have went down with you as kids? Because they did merge for a bit and all they're separate now. But they were Wigan and Leigh for a while, wasn't they? And
I remember, I've not had too much dealings with it, but they were classing as service areas and such like that. It was none of that was in existence when we sort of played. And because I'm going back to probably mid to late 80s there, really. So it's a long time ago, But I don't think it had gone down too well, because I think I've always been a great believer, even now, with my involvement now, rivalries are key, aren't they? And rivalries, even just at a young age, your Leigh versus Wigan games are big games, whether you're playing schoolboys or whether it's out there on the JJB or whatever it's called these days, DW, or even down here at Leigh. Those are the games that everybody looks for, aren't they? And where I'm involved now, the first thing that you look for on that fixture list is your Rochdale and Oldham game, because that's your big game, isn't it? Your local rivalries. So it's a little bit like mergers. I don't know. I don't know you'd ever get those to really want to work together as such. But for me, the Leigh and Wigan games, I think they should always be separate, and they should be playing against each other.
No, I do myself, mate. It's like witness and monitor. I imagine it just wouldn't function.
No.
Maybe this is no word from anyone from Wigan or Leigh, but maybe it was an avenue to poach the better players. Maybe they'll
possibly, because some of the ones I have in the game, and I've got some good friends in community game, and you hear all the stories about he played for our service area, or he was in our academy and he's ended up at Wigan or Saints. So you do hear all that sort of. But I suppose you'll get that. Ultimately, the best talent will end up at the club, the best club, really, won't they? Whether that's fine, whichever route they take, generally the best talent will end up at the best clubs, won't it?
Yeah, it's irrelevant whether they were 13 or 23. If they're still good enough, they'll be there, won't they?
Yeah, that's rule of thumb. Usually works.
That's it. Yeah. So how was your transition into high school, Andy? How did you find that? And do you think sport brought the ice for you with that?
Yeah, I think so, because very much we went to, as I mentioned, 12 Apostles School. So where you went from 12 Apostles, pretty much everybody, you didn't break away and all go to different high schools. You pretty much did 90% of the class would go to St Mary's High School. So you went with your mates. The classes that you ended up, there was a good few people within that class were from your primary school. And again, it was all about, the lads who were in your class. It was literally, as soon as that bell went, you're out on playground with a rugby ball in your hands and you're all playing rugby together again. So I think definitely sport made that transition. Certainly rugby, it makes that transition very easy, doesn't it? Because you're all mates together and you're doing what you enjoy doing at break times and lunch times and then evenings and weekends.
That's it, mate. Yeah. So a little bit on that. So as you've gone from your club to town team, haven't you? And then you're going into high school when growth happens at different rates. Are you beginning to notice a level change in standard?
Yeah, I think you do. I think you start seeing, certainly the lads who've gone on to have really successful professional careers. I think it's at that stage when you reach high school, they start really standing out, don't they? Or they did in my eyes. The names that we all knew were real good players at 11, 12, 13. By the time they're 15, 16, they're pretty much on somebody's books, aren't they? So yeah. I think you really start, and I think as well, size begins to level out a little bit, doesn't it? Where you might have some of the really young kids who are big and bulldoze their way through, but as you start getting into high school and everybody's catching up with each other, it becomes more about talent and strength and ability rather than just pure size,
Yeah. And how did you find school, mate? Was it something you enjoyed, or was it just a social voyeur at some point?
Wasn't particularly academic, if I'm honest. I sort of always just did enough to get by, really, at school. It was never something that I was never going to be moving on to university and being that way inclined. I was always more, I think my route was always going to be down the apprenticeship route and working and grafting for a living, and that was identified, I think, very early as where I was going to go. And fortunately, I had good parents who guided me into a good apprenticeship. And when them times when you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, or you might not be feeling it, my dad would kick me up backside and get me in there.
Most mornings.
That's it, most mornings, yes. So. Yeah, definitely. I think from school, from my perspective, was just about, I always just did enough. I was never sat revising too long or working too hard. I'd have an exam coming up and I'd just about do enough to get to where I needed to be, and then do the bare minimum, really, if I'm honest.
Yeah. So how's the standard from club rugby to school rugby? Was it pretty similar?
Yeah, I think obviously because it's a relatively small town, same thing. The lads in your high school, there's two real high schools that feed into the rugby system, if you like, and Bedford High and St Mary's, and the core of the teams between Leigh East and Leigh Miners Rangers are made up from those two schools, really. Obviously, there's other schools, but primarily in my sort of time and age group and years, they were, half the team would be from Bedford High, the other half would be from our school, St Mary's. So, yeah, I think that the standard really was it was pretty good, because I think you were getting there wasn't really a lot of other sport. We didn't have much other sports really that were as prominent as rugby league in that town. So it was a really good standard, and I think it reflects with the calibre of the two clubs and the success that those two clubs have in not just developing and numbers, but also achievements as well.
Yeah, and maintaining that as well as providing for the pro game and the semi-pro game, and Andy, it's great work keeping that up, isn't it?
It does. It's massive. The community game, something that massive amount of respect for everybody that they do what they do, and they do it for the love primarily, don't they? The amount of people that you meet who are sort of an older age, and they say, I came here when my kid was 6 or 7 years old when they first start, and the kids have moved on, they're grown up, they're married with their own kids, and they're still doing that voluntary job because they love it, and they've become part of the furniture in these community clubs. So huge respect to anybody that puts their hand up to do anything within the game, because it's vital, isn't it?
It is, mate. It's key, and they're the gems, aren't they? Because that's why we all started doing rugby, and in one, whether it was coaching, reffing, administrating, running, playing, we all do it because fundamentally we love the game, don't we? And then
you do. I think anybody who's got any level of involvement in the sport, they do it ultimately for the love of it, don't they? And funnily enough, we had a few issues with over Christmas with facilities being closed and weather. We needed a 4G pitch. Our head coach wanted to just run a session on New Year's Eve, keep them all on the toes, So I picked the phone up to Miners Rangers down here, and a couple of my old mates are sort of now in like treasurer positions or work on the committee and what have you. And I was chatting to Paul Blackburn, one of the guys who's the treasurer there, and we were having a chat about the old days because the facility they've got there, they've just had a new 4G pitch down, and it's one of the best facilities you'll come across. And we was chatting about it because we remember the days where you used to get changed half a mile down the road in the IFO community centre. You'd troop across the field, knee deep in mud, play a game of rugby, troop back and get changed, and have an hot dog in community centre, and then go home. It's a different world really when you look at what they've got now.
No, it is. Yeah, it is. I think maybe the lads that are coming through from my age and like younger, so I'm like 33 now, and it was pretty good when I went. They were still on is it the canal bank or like a river down the side? They were still at the clubhouse in front of that, so I didn't have to do the trek you done. Yeah.
Well, that's the miners open age setup is on Twist Lane. The juniors is a mile or so away from there, and back in the day,
is it separate? Yeah,
literally just a set of fields. There was no clubhouse. There was the facility they've got now is, I think it's probably the envy of a lot in the pro game. Certainly, it's a fantastic facility and far cry from what we used to be playing on a Sunday morning.
So saying we probably take it for granted, don't we? Know the facilities are that good in most places.
I think, and rightly so. Really, I think to give these young kids and these young athletes a chance, you've got to give them the best possible chance, haven't you? And the best facilities. And when you talk about standards and wanting to beat the Aussies, I think that's not just about what goes on in that sort of World Cup with the open age and the elite. That's where it starts. Facilities, numbers at that age, participation, development. All roads lead to that top of the that elite level, but it's down there where the journey begins, isn't it?
Oh, so it is, mate. Yeah, it's where the love of the game starts, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll touch a bit more on your journey with Rochdale later on, but is it difficult to arrange stuff like that? So the 1 week do you have to train at Leigh Miners, another week do you train closer to where a lot of your lads are from? Or
no, we're pretty fortunate. We have we've got state-of-the-art training facility at Hotwood Hall College. We're a partner of ours. It was just over leading into Christmas, with it being a college facility, they closed down for the Christmas holidays. So Gary was just keen to get a session on in the holiday period, if you like. So and obviously that's at this time of year, and with the weather that we've just had, it couldn't be on a grass field. So we just needed to get hold of a 4G field, and we were fortunate to have some good relationships and connections with these clubs, and they helped us out, which it's what the game's all about, isn't it? The Rugby League family, we all do our bit for each other and help each other out.
Yeah. So when it comes to the back end of high school, then, mate, you mentioned your apprenticeship there. So what was that in, and what did that entail, and how long did it last?
I went literally from school leaving age. I went straight into what back in the day they were. I don't know what they do now. Well, I do know what they do now. They're a lot better than they were, but it was like a YTS. It was a youth training scheme, if you like. So still remember, I think my first wage was about £28.50 a week. It was on or something like that.
Feel like a boss as well.
That's it, yeah, and you didn't know what to do. It was burning a hole in your pocket. But no, that was, as I say, my mum and dad. They always knew I was never going to be going to university and wasn't academic. So I got the right advice. Fortunate to have good parents and didn't really need a careers advisor. My dad pointed me in that direction. You get a trade.
Gently.
And then, you set yourself up. Then you've always something to fall back on, haven't you? And I've been very lucky. I've been fortunate. I stuck at it at times when it gets difficult and you don't. Sometimes you feel like you're not getting anywhere and it's difficult. But I stuck at it and I've got my rewards for that sort of work ethic. But there's absolutely no doubt that was instilled in me by others. It wasn't a natural thing.
I can imagine, mate.
The boots up the backside many a time,
Especially if it's a size 11 or 12, mate. You feel it, don't you?
You certainly do. So that was me really, straight from school and into an apprenticeship and electrical engineering apprenticeship. Yeah.
eye-opener being in the adult world, mate.
Certainly is, yeah. You go from, well, I was in the company that I went to work for. I was literally straight into the big wide world of working away from home and out of town, as they call it. So staying in digs and it opens your eyes, doesn't it? You're in a big boys world then, aren't you? And, But again, when you look back, all these things and these experiences, I think, you take something from them and you learn from them, don't you? And it's all part of that journey and development of, as a person, you develop skills and resistance to certain things, don't you? And it's all a journey, and I don't think you'd ever get. Certainly, I don't think I'd ever have done probably as well as I have. I've been fortunate to do without that grounding and that sort of that apprenticeship and that upbringing.
Yeah, which is transferable skills across the walk of life in general, mate. Not just the game outside the game, isn't it?
It is. I think it's a work ethic thing, isn't it? And it's something that I always try and pride myself on. I'm always, if I'm arranged to be at a meeting, I'm always there on time. I'll always try and be first in, and I'll always try and be last out the office if I can be, because I just want to, make people see that I'm not resting on my laurels, and that, I always try and ensure that my own work ethic's right, so that when I'm giving, somebody a reminder about theirs, I can, they're not turning around and going, well, he doesn't do it, but he's telling me to do it.
Setting standards from the top and hoping it trickles down, Andy, innit?
Lead by example if you can, don't you?
Yeah. So how was it doing that and combining like your rugby? How did that work, or did it not work?
No, to be fair, I fell away from rugby. I think I did well in terms of juniors. I really enjoyed playing junior rugby, and I did a couple of tours to France with schoolboys and captained the team over there in France. We played down in Limoux, and we had some good times down there playing against Limoux. Played in the earlier age groups, which would have been around like 12-year-old, and then I think in final years, maybe 15, 16, we toured down there again, and I captained the side down there. And when you talk about standards, I think at that time when you're at 15, 16, you're physically developing, and it's real rugby. We had some real tough tussles with the French down there, and we had some really good players in those sides. So, but as I got to sort of heading towards open age, I realised, because you're trying to combine work and still trying to train and still try and play, and you're working away from home, it's difficult. And if I'm being brutally honest, it's an hard game as well. And people always said to me, why did you never sort of play pro, or did you never make it? And I'm an honest bloke, and to be fair, I always remember I had trouble with my shoulders. I broke collarbones for fun. I wasn't never the biggest. I was quite lean and picked a lot of injuries up. And I guess the answer, I always felt that I was quick and I had skill and could play the game. Could play the game with my eyes closed, but probably not tough enough, if I'm honest. And being
just
really
in the body, you mean? Yeah.
It's a brutal game, isn't it? And I probably couldn't, just didn't have that physical toughness, and just to be able to deal with the, breaking your shoulders and keep bouncing back. I always remember my dad saying, unless you go ever make money out at game, you need to pack it in, because you just won't spend your life in
a sling.
Hospital, basically. Yeah. So I never really progressed beyond, never really pushed on into academies. I trained a bit with the old Leigh Academy at Elton Park, and Terry Maron down there dragged us down and trained at academy down there, but never progressed any further than that. And probably being honest, never. You look at some lads who have gone on and had successful careers, probably never really tough enough to do that, I don't think, and combine my aspirations and my ambitions off in my career. You couldn't combine both, really. You had to be 100% committed and giving your all to one or the other, I think.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with just reaching them levels of amateur either, Andy, is there? You've been successful, you've been on tours, you've captained teams, you're building a character, you don't know you build it. until you're hitting what you do now, which we'll talk about in a bit. But
no, I think
there's nothing wrong with that, mate.
I think you're right, because I think some of your best memories, I'll meet up with lads now and who we went to France on those tours with, and we still talk about. And I'm talking, I can't even count the number of years, but we still talk about those days, or and like I say, I was talking to Paul there, who's treasurer at Leigh Miners, and we were talking about them old days. So the fond memories, aren't they? The good memories that you made with mates, and the ones who had the ability to push on and play pro did it, and they did it. Some of them did it with to a very high standard. But I was happy to hop off the bus when I did, because I realised it wasn't going to be a career for me, and probably I wasn't tough enough to keep getting beat up every weekend.
Not many people are, mate, are they? So, was it ever your idea to maybe revisit the game in another capacity, or has it just sort of fell on your lap to a degree?
I carried on. We always supported Leigh, and followed Leigh with me mum. I say my mum, my dad and my granddad, my dad's dad, and we carried on supporting Leigh. I've always watched Leigh. I just never had any real desires to play the game beyond sort of 17 years of age. Really, I got more into me work, and of course, it's the biggest problem we have now with juniors is you reach that age, don't you, and you start finding other things. We're going out at weekends, and you start finding girls, and you start finding things.
Girls, yeah.
You become a bit more of an attractive proposition on a Saturday and Sunday than getting a good hiding off 18-stone lads. So, I went down that route rather than the rugby. But my involvement carried on as a supporter, and as I reached a sort of point in time, obviously further down the track with my career, when I was in positions of responsibility with businesses that I didn't own, I would always sponsor a game or do what I could for the community game. And then obviously, as I've got been a bit more successful, and I've had the ability to be able to contribute in different ways, I've always tried my best to do whatever I can for the game, for rugby league, because it's something I've always loved.
So how have you managed to stay, don't think relevant's the word, but how have you managed to stay modern with the game? Because it hasn't half changed, Andy, hasn't it? And personalities have changed, and talks have changed, and clubs have changed.
They have. I think probably for me, that's possibly why I've been, I wouldn't say successful, but I've been in my involvement. I've sort of, I didn't really, I came away from it, from an actual being on the inside and involved with the game. I went away from it after I finished playing, and wasn't really involved in committees or coaching, or didn't do anything like that. And it was only really as I came back to the game as a sponsor, and I got involved, and I was sort of dragged into the administration side of it then. And as a sponsor, and helping run clubs and giving clubs a bit of guidance around some of the knowledge that I'd learned from running businesses. Essentially, I'd gone through the ranks in my profession, as right through as far as I could go in terms of electrical engineering, and I'd gone more to the admin side, the office side, and probably found that I was quite good at that, and transferable skills into, because what you find with rugby league clubs, and I've been involved in 3 at professional level, and the reason I've ended up being involved in them is they've been ran badly and almost going bust, and we've come through the door really, and had to pick them up and get them moving, and give them some, just instill some basic fundamental business strategies within them to get them moving again,
Right, and it's that thing that fans don't see, do they? They think, oh, the club's in a mess, but why can't he do this? It's because there's a mess, and then there's whatever you find it in.
Yeah, I mean, there is. It's often where you pick them up, and to be fair, even going back to my involvement at Leigh, I'd been a sponsor at Leigh, and we've been around 2012. Leigh, it's on. They're obviously flying high now under Derek, and they're going really well. But at that point in time, they were struggling in the championship. They were getting crowds of maybe 1,200. Players weren't getting paid. There was some serious problems, and we went in as a board. I worked at the time was with Derek and a few others, and the mess that was picked up there was significant. There was HMRC winding up petitions, dropping through the door. There was players we'd been promised money for months and weeks and months on end and not been paid. And we picked up a real difficult situation there. And that club turned round with the hard work of quite a few people. And Derek's taken that on, and invested hard in it and has got his own vision and pushed them, back where he wants them to be in Super League. But it wasn't always that rosy, and they were in quite a bit of a mess. And similarly, when I left Leigh, I did a bit of sponsoring for Swinton and ended up picking Swinton up in similar circumstances. I bought that club off the previous chairman and owner. I did a deal basically to buy the club off him, and at that point in time, it was a huge gamble because there was no guarantees that club could carry on, and we took a bit of a gamble, and we, again, a bit of a red alert thing. We jumped in and had a go and sorted it out, and had a degree of I believe success is all relative. Like you say, it's not all about. Not everybody can go and lift the Challenge Cup at Wembley, can they? There's certain wins that you can have at certain levels that are all relevant. They're all wins, aren't they? Regardless of whether you're at the highest level and you're lifting the Super League Grand Final, or whether you're picking something up that's in a bad way.
You're surviving. Yeah.
Turning it round, yeah.
Yeah. And so, how was it, first of all, for the first job? It's your hometown club. It's a club you've been supporting forever. And because we have grand thoughts of what our hometown clubs are, don't we? Everybody has it, Andy, don't they? You've gone in and reality's smacked you in the face with it. So does it make you look at the game different?
I think you do. I think there's a lot of idealism on terraces. You live in an ideal world, don't you? And you think that everything's easy, and I was guilty of that myself, to be fair. You stand on terraces and why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? And very idealistic view on things. But when you get into the actual devil in the detail of it all, and the nitty-gritty of it, you realise that I understand now why the previous board or chairman couldn't do that, because it's not sustainable, it's not achievable, it's not, you can't finance it. Whatever the reason is, there's always a reason. 9 times out of 10, there's a reason why a club's not doing something, isn't there? It's not a case of oblivious to it. The ideas are easy. There's a lot of people can come up with ideas. The biggest thing is execution, and people willing to put that time and effort into execution. I could write you a book of ideas, but getting somebody to go out and execute them is a different story, isn't it?
No, it is, especially under a bit of pressure, mate, because who knows what's going on at home for you at that point, or
that's the thing.
Your extended family and stuff, isn't it?
That's the thing. I see it with whether it be football clubs. I have friends who are, part owners of pro football clubs, and investors or shareholders, board directors. Whatever level of involvement you've got, if you're doing it with a degree of care and you care about it, it has an effect on either your personal life or your business. Because time is arguably more important than money, isn't it? Because you've only got a finite, a finite amount of time. You get 24 hours in a day. You don't get any more, do you? But if you're fortunate, you can accrue money. You can't accrue hours in a day, can you? So
no.
Your time's the biggest thing, really. I think for me, it's the balance that I always try and get right, and make sure that I'm very careful to divide my time up and make sure I do my day job, do enough, prioritise my family, and then whatever time I've got, I'll give to the game, and that's how I've always tried to do it. Is if I commit to something, I will give it that time, I'll give it that effort, and I'll always put my money where my mouth is as well when I need to.
Yeah. So when you go into that first role, mate, is it not only, like you just said, it was a bit of an eye opener, but them transferable skills we're on about? Because surely times are that bad, difficult chats to be had, aren't they? Not just with players, with members of staff, from maybe kit men or ladies to the kitchen people to stewards. What was you out your depth at that early stage, or because you've been quite successful off the field, had you become?
No, I think Leigh was a good learning curve for me in respect to professional club, because obviously I wasn't the main guy there. I wasn't the chairman. I was part of the board, so that was probably me learning, my administration sort of boardroom apprenticeship, if you like. So I learned from certain things that I saw being done, how not to do things, and I learned from experiences. I thought, if I'm ever in a position where I'm doing that, I'll do it this way, or there's no, and to be honest, the duties and the things that I did, I made mistakes, because we all do, and you learn from those mistakes, and when you move on in life and you go into different clubs and different roles, you probably don't make those mistakes again. So it was a good experience and a bad experience in sort of all in one, wrapped up in one, really. There was good, there was bad, but we genuinely, the involvement at Leigh came from being asked to get involved, asked to put some money in, and then dragged into the boardroom, really, to help out, because it was a case of, at that time, a few of us stepped forward and stood in, and had we all not done that, what we did at that time, who knows where the club might be. And then, as I said, Derek sort of taking that on. He wanted to take it in a direction, he's taken it in, and respect to him. He's never give up, has he? He's stuck at it. He's had some.
He fronts it as well, doesn't he?
To him, Derek, we never always saw eye to eye, and we do things differently, but equally we do things. There's certain things that we both see eye to eye on and we disagree on. But he's one thing you can't ever say is that he's not committed. And again, he's had some serious setbacks in relegations, and some big issues around not making top fours and having to get rid of players, and everything that he's done, he's stuck at it and come again. And he's, I think he's reaping his rewards at the moment, because he seems to be, going into Super League in best shape I think they've ever been in.
Yeah, I'd say that as well. He won't be left wondering, will he, Derek?
No, he's never gonna.
No,
he don't leave, like you say, he doesn't leave anything out there, does he?
No, and there will be many clubs that wish they had someone like that in charge, might they? Because whether you like the Leigh Leopards or not, it's all anyone's talking about at the minute.
That's the thing, yeah. I mean, there's there's an argument to, everybody's experts, aren't they? Everybody could do things.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But ultimately, your main aim, I believe, is if you're going to do whatever you're doing in this day and age, it's about getting eyeballs on what you're doing. It's about getting people talking about what you're doing, and that half of the people might be talking about it in a negative light, but they still care.
Publicity. Yeah.
Everybody knows who Leigh Leopards are now, don't they?
That's it, exactly, mate. Yeah, exactly.
Something in respect to that, and yeah, they're having a go. To be fair to them, the game needs people, disruptors, to come and do things a little bit.
Shake it up
a bit. And to be fair to Derek, he's trying to do that. So, that's off to him. I hope he's successful with it.
Yeah, and obviously, with you having a bridge there, if there's opportunities further down the line that benefit Rochdale and benefit Leigh, it's worth a chat also, isn't it? It's...
Yeah, I mean, they were good with us last season, because we had a bit of an injury crisis, and our coach at the time was needing, wanting to strengthen the squad, and we took a couple of players off them on loan deals. So yeah, there's a relationship there, and I think it's one of those. My general sort of findings in the game is the clubs do work together. We have the council meetings and the championship meetings, and generally there's a good camaraderie between club owners and chairman, and there is a good spirit in that particular sort of camp of clubs. So yeah, there's never any real major issues between clubs that I come across anyway.
Yeah, no, Clint said the same. The York owner, he said the same. Like, everyone pulls together, really, and if you can't help someone, you direct them in a way that possibly can.
You do,
which
yeah.
is nice to hear, mate, isn't it? It's not about getting one up on someone off the field, is it? It's about doing it on the field.
Well, ultimately, I'm a great believer in that we're all only as strong as the sport. So, if we want the sport to progress and to grow, we've all got to try and help each other. We've got to work with each other. I don't think we do enough in terms of. I think we could. The creative side of me thinks that if we work together more closely as clubs, we could probably help each other increase our numbers, increase that eyeballs. So I'm pretty sure that IMG now, who are reviewing the game at the moment and coming up with a strategic vision for the sport. I'm pretty sure that they'll be looking at that aspect because, you know, I'm not for 1 minute saying centralise everything, but certainly if there's more of a united brand and a united front across all the divisions and clubs, I'm pretty sure that some of the parts it would be a stronger game for being joined up that way.
Yeah, if both the product and the image will only strengthen and grow bigger, won't it? If we're together, sort of thing.
You'd hope so.
It's not going to be a bad thing.
No, definitely, and I think that's the encouraging thing about the coming back together of the Super League and the Rugby Football League and the involvement of a strategic partner in IMG. That's the encouraging thing for me because it's about coming together and working together and an acknowledgement that the game's bigger than one division. Yeah. It's about the big picture, and as I said, the sum of all those parts. If we can grow all those parts in isolation but bring them together, then you'd like to think it'll be a strong sport, or certainly a stronger sport.
Stronger, yeah. Did it feel like that, Andy? That it was very much Super League and then everyone else?
I think so. I think, you know, I was over at Swinton in 2018 when effectively there was a breakaway, wasn't there? You know, Super League became their own entity, if you like, and employed their own chief exec at the time, Robert Elston. And there was a feeling that, you know, it was divided, and I don't think anybody really believed it was the right way. But it was one of those things where I think it went that way. It didn't work. There's been a coming back together now, and hopefully now with the involvement of IMG and a real willingness to try and drive the sport, it can be, you know, it's the game. We want to become the sport that we know it is, and maximise that potential that we know this game's got. It's a great game. It's not sold and marketed well enough, and there's not enough people watching it. So hopefully that's the thing that collectively can be addressed over the years.
Yeah. So the spell at Leigh, mate, did that whet the appetite enough to go and have a look at Swinton, or how did the Swinton opportunity come about?
I wouldn't say whet the appetite. I was quite just drifting into the background a little bit, and I was doing a bit helping out in amateur game. I sat on a couple of committees and helped out the Barla committee with the Lancashire setups, and helping a few friends of mine out in the amateur game, and I was quite enjoying that, to be honest. And I got asked, and we'll probably go into a little bit more detail around players that I've been associated with, but I got asked by a couple of players and would I sponsor him. And John Duffy, who was the coach at Swinton, I knew John from Leigh, and Stuart Littler was playing there. He's a friend of mine, so I got the sort of hook to go down and sponsor a few games, and we put the company on the shirt and all that, and all of a sudden you're getting drawn in, aren't you? You're on the wrong in, and I got pulled in, and then that was around the back end of 16, 17, and I think as 17 progressed, it was pretty clear they were struggling financially, and there was a few problems. You know, again, I think the alarm bells always start going up when there's rumours that players are not getting paid, and there was a few issues, you know, and I just got sort of pulled into it really, and asked to have a look at it. And there was myself and another sponsor got pulled into a meeting, and the sort of level of debt and the problems were presented to us, and it was a case of, can you help? And all your common sense and all your best, your sense and all your, I'm trying to think of the right words, your best endeavours. You think, I need to walk away from this. I don't want to get involved in it, but a challenge is a challenge.
You're not signing away.
So we got involved, and I think on the whole, you know, there was a little bit of controversy towards the end of my time there, but on the whole, it was a successful period. We turned it round both on and off the field, and in the 2019 season, the year I left at the end of that year, was the best season they'd had in many decades, and broke a lot of club records, and we finished 9th in Championship, which, as the lowest funded team in that competition, was, you know, again, when you talk about success being relevant, I believe that was a good season that we had as a board and as a club as a whole. It was a good team effort.
Yeah, and that's more than a turnaround, mate. A friend of mine played at Swinton, so just a few questions about Swinton really was it difficult to establish a home in an ex-rugby union ground? Was that difficult?
Yeah, I think they did. Obviously, before my time, they'd been nomadic, hadn't they? You know, He lost the Station Road ground in '92 and never really had a real home after that. And he settled at a few different locations. But when you're in Championship, there's a certain criteria that the ground's got to meet and the minimum standard. And I think the previous venue they were using didn't, so they moved to Sale as a needs must really. And they've actually made it a nice home for themselves there now. And the people at Sale Rugby Union are good people, and it seems to be a nice fit for them. You know, we had a good relationship with Sale. I think they've continued that, and it's a home in terms of I suppose home is where your heart is, and their heart's always going to be in Station Road in Swinton. But as homes go, I think it's the best one they've had since they left Swinton.
Yeah, it is a decent little setup, mate. In it, I know I've played against Sale there a couple of times, like the semi-pro team, but they were amateur when I played. And you can't fault it, can you?
No, and they're ambitious and they're progressing really well. As a mate of mine is a couple of my friends are on the exec committee there, and they've got some ambitions and they're doing really well. And what they do really well is the community engagement and the minis and juniors and the development. They're really strong development club. So yeah, really, again, whether it's rugby league or rugby union, that what I've always found is that volunteer aspect, that development aspect, and doing things for the betterment of the community. You're on exactly the same page, regardless of whether it's league or union.
Foundations are the same, mate, aren't
they? Foundations are exactly the same.
Yeah. The other thing was, what people might not realise is a lot of Super League talent in that Swinton team. So you went about and signed really young lads, which it seems to be coming back around a circle, but we'll talk about the Rochdale bit in a bit. So a friend of mine, Chris Atkin, played, and then you had Andy Ackers was there, wasn't he? Mike Butt's still there and still carving it up. You had like a really young core sprinkled with that bit of experience. Think how do you go out and find that young talent, and how do you talk them into being at Swinton?
Well, I think in terms of likes of Chris Atkin, Chris, when I talk about the financial situation they were in, Chris played a little bit of a role and helped us turn that around, because we actually, one of the first things we did, we took a transfer fee for Chris from OKR. So, he was probably played his little part in us getting the finances right, because that transfer fee contributed to us trying to straighten the finances out. So yeah, Chris was unfortunately, he was going out the door as I was coming in, but he was, someday again, some of the best players that I've come across are good characters and good people. And I think when you talk about Chris Atkin, great family, good man, good person, and can play rugby, but he's fundamentally he's a good guy. And
all the above, mate, definitely.
All those players you mentioned, Mike Butt is of the same ilk. He's one of those who can't do enough for, he'll go and see the fans at the end of every game. If the post protectors need bringing in, you'd think that'd be the responsibility of others. He'll go and grab them. He's got that, he'll carry the bottles off the bus. He's got that ethic about him where he's a team player, and not just within the team on the field, but the team within the club environment. So, good people. I think, first of all, good people. We had a core of them at Swinton, and we were fortunate in the recruitment that we did, because we had a bit of a nightmare 2018, because by the time I'd got sort of stuck into it at the back end of 17, we'd missed a lot of the available talent and recruitment.
Okay.
We were sort of picking up players just really to fill a squad in 18, and we had a bad year. But 19, we sort of in the summer, we laid down a bit of a recruitment strategy and a plan, and identified where we'd want to be, and got some stuff done, and we targeted some lads from in the amateur game, the community game, that came in. And if you look at Matty Ashton, for example, Matty came for an opportunity. He was identified as just a kid that had a bit of potential. He came in
basically.
He came in 19, and he broke the club's record, try scoring record in a season, took the championship by storm. And I'll never forget it. We played at Leigh, funnily enough, and I was flying out to Mallorca on the Monday morning. I was at Leigh, and my phone went. Well, I got to Mallorca, and I think I was just sat having a beer, you know, nice quiet, thinking I've got a week of this, great sunshine, you know, putting my feet up and enjoying it. My phone went, and he'd scored 4 tries at Leigh the day before, and there was a bit of a scramble for his signature. So I had Al Fitzpatrick from Warrington ringing me. Simon Moran's asked me to give you a ring, and we want this player. What do you want for him, basically? Name your price. Yeah. So that's the kind of story, really, where the very few of them knows the game. But there was a bit of a scramble. Wigan came in for him. Toronto at the time were looking at him. I think Leeds had a bit of a nibble, and he just set the world on fire that season. And you know, he was a classic example that I always say that if you get your recruitment right, and that's probably a freak one that you come in and take to it so naturally and do what he did. But certainly, if you're willing to give lads 2 or 3 years and develop them, coach them, and work with them, you can get a lot of success stories, and that's been proved with others. I know we'll probably go into names that I've had dealings with and come across, but there's some real good success stories that's come through Swinton in recent years, certainly.
Yeah, and how do you keep the wheels turning when you're on them, like, you know, them waves of buzz and excitement, and like finishing life is great. You go into all the bigger clubs, aren't you? You compete in, there's Challenge Cups come round, which I've no doubt all the lads look forward to. Plus, your lads are going work as well.
Yeah.
And like you talked about Mike Buck there, and his job's a grafter. See him on Instagram, and he doesn't stop, does he? No,
he doesn't. He doesn't. To be fair, he's got, again, you talk about work ethic. He's a grafter. He is a grafter, whether that be on the field or off the field. You know, they work. It's in your DNA, isn't it? You know, he just is a worker, a grafter, and I think that is, there's a lot to be said for that. You know, you can fall short in terms of talent, but you can't fall short if you want to be certainly pushing towards Super League and an elite player. You can't fall short in terms of your work ethic, can you? You've got to be.
You can't be outworked.
No, you can never. Or you should never be outworked, should you?
No.
You should. You know, there's always going to be somebody who's going to be bigger, better, faster than you. But they should never outwork you, should they?
No. And you can accept that, like you just said, Andy, can't you? Someone might be technically or gifted or better than you. That doesn't matter. They might be quicker than you, a bit stronger than you. But as long as you're willing to do that extra hard 1% inside your mate or in front of your mate, that's what matters, doesn't it? And that's what them sort of clubs are built on, I imagine.
They are, and I think that's something because I do employ a lot of rugby lads, and over the years I've given apprenticeships and opportunities to lads, and I've generally gone down the route of giving them to lads who have seen that ethic in them on the field and in and around the rugby environment. I've thought he's a grafter, and if he applies that rugby mentality to business and to a career opportunity, he'll do well. And I've very rarely been let down by identifying, bringing somebody into our business that's come from a rugby background. Because don't get me wrong, there's not everybody's of that ilk, but if you get the right guys who've got the right mentality and work ethic about them, they can transfer that, whether it's from off the field, off the field, can't they? And vice versa.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah, because I think you can mould skill set, but you can't mould effort.
No,
it's either it's in him or it's not.
It's inbuilt into it. Yeah, it's ingrained. Again, I think a lot of it, from a lot of the good lads that I've had dealings with, who've come into my business, or I've had personal dealings with and met the families. Again, like I said with myself, they generally always come from a good family who've had it instilled in them. Don't get me wrong, there's ones who haven't, but as a rule of thumb, every player that I've known that's been of that ilk has always had a good family and a good upbringing, and good people attract good people, don't they?
Yeah. So how is it when you sit down with them players, mate, whether it be to let go of them, to re-sign them, when you've approached them, when times are hard, when lads aren't getting paid, how are them types of chats? Because nothing can really prepare you for the bad side of sport, can it?
No, and I think that's why I've always tried to take an honest approach with it, because I think one of the failings that I've seen when you go into clubs that have failed and are struggling is because they've been over ambitious. They've probably set, wage structures and offered contracts that they can't afford in reality. So I always remember my first words when I went to Swinton, and I went in the dressing room as my first game as chairman, and we needed to win to stay up. It was classed as because you have the £1 million game. Well, this was, I don't know if you remember, at the bottom of Championship, you basically, I'm telling a lie, I'm thinking about the working one. This was the Oldham game. We needed to beat Oldham to stay up. So the loser of that game was going to finish second bottom and get relegated. And we classed it, we to promote the game and advertise it, we classed it as the £1 million game instead of the £1 million game, because the difference in funding was about 100 grand. So it's like £1 million or whatever the strap line was. I can't remember, but we put a bit of a thing around it and promoted it to get a crowd in, But I'm rambling a bit, but that particular game, I went in to the dressing room before the game, and we put a win bonus on for that game, an extra win bonus. And I made them a promise, and I said, listen, moving forward, I know we've had issues here. I know there's been payment issues. I said, you might not always get what you want. Don't get me wrong. We're not going to be throwing silly money about. I said, but everything on any contract that I sign will get paid. So, if you want to earn silly money, you might have to move to another club. But if you sign a deal here, you will get every penny that's on that contract, and I'll personally guarantee you. And from the day we're walking in the door at Swinton to the day I walked out, nobody ever missed a payment. So
it was totally honoured. Yeah.
Every contract got honoured, and that's where I am today, because I've seen it too many times where lads have been overpromised and not been paid enough. So I've paid what in some instances not been paid at all. So it was one thing I was strong on, really, and the coaches that I've had have always been strong on that and said, let's make sure that we look after lads. We appreciate that cash is tight. We've not got mega bucks, but whatever we do promise, let's make sure we deliver it. And I've always tried to do that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a bit of honesty, Andy, is there?
No, I mean, it's always, you can't always be, you can't always tell everybody what's going on to the, level of detail that you'd like to. But generally, I'm always pretty open with everybody, whether it be internally or even externally with fans. I'll go and sit on fans forums, and I'll engage on social media, because what I have found again is there's a lot of nonsense gets posted in public domain on social media and forums, and rather than just let that grow arms and legs and mischief makers, have a field day with it, I'd rather correct it if I can and put the facts into play. Yeah. So some people
the bod mate in it, yeah, definitely.
But, yeah, I mean, I do get criticised sometimes. People will say, "Why do you bother? Leave it, leave people to it." But when you're as passionate about what you're doing and you're as engrossed in what you're doing, you do take it personally sometimes. And people want to say things that are not true. It does, it can get to a little bit. And, that's just being the human side of you. It's not nice to read something that it's not factually correct.
Yeah, especially when they're not going to front their comment themselves if it's hid behind a cartoon picture with a bad name and that, isn't it? But it's mad what fans stick to. They'll stick to the negative a lot of the time, won't they? Because it's a narrative that people want to run with.
That's why you can't beat fans forums, proper face-to-face forums. And, you don't get me wrong, you'll get asked some questions, you'll get people fire into you at times. But I think I'd rather have somebody who's got the sort of guts to come and front you and say it to your face, rather than, like you said, sniping via a keyboard at you. It's respect to anybody who'll front up and have their opinion, because everybody is entitled to one at the end of the day. And some of the things we've took out of fans forums where people have probably put it across critically, but we've taken that constructively and said, well, you're right, we'll take that away and we'll sort it, And again, I think that's that communication and that honesty side of it, where if you're willing to do it, people hopefully feel that they do get listened to.
Yeah, and that's what them forums are for as well, isn't it, mate? They're there for both sides to voice an answer or a question.
Yeah, you want to get important messages out there, don't you? And whatever club you're at whatever size, there's important messages and things that you need to get out there, and you can use the forum for that. But equally, I think it's a two-way street, and they should always be used for that fan interaction and that fan engagement, because they are, regardless of what your ownership model is in a club, your most important stakeholder, whether you be a supporters-run club or whether you've got a benefactor and a wealthy owner, regardless of that ownership model, your key stakeholders are always your fans, isn't it? So
your fans, yeah.
You've got to give that respect and that engagement, and give them the time, the time and the input that they deserve.
What's the atmosphere like around the club when you're in the type of game that you was against Oldham, mate? How do you keep things positive and smiley when people are probably on edge, aren't they, and worrying about the futures?
Yeah, it's a tough. I mean, that's the thing is, I had 2 years back to back. We ended up with coming down to games on the final day of the season, and it was 80 minutes to know which division you were going to be in. And we had that first one where my very first game as chairman, we beat Oldham to stay up, and Oldham were relegated. And then the following year, we only if you remember, they did a restructure, and we were technically relegated. We finished bottom, but we got a lifeline, and we actually ended up in a playoff against Workington, who were in League One. And it all came down again to another 80 minutes of rugby, and we had to beat Workington to secure our championship survival and status for the following year. So, touch wood, I've come out the right side on those two, but they're not the nicest experiences, because the impact, the financial impact of straight away. In that instance, it was 100 grand off your central distribution the following year, and it's a long way back when you're relegated as well. As we found at Rochdale, it's a big challenge to the League One competition. It's a tough old league to get out of and to be competitive in. We've found that out the last few years being at Rochdale. It's a difficult division.
So how did the Rochdale opportunity come about, mate, and what made it viable to you?
Yeah, well, obviously we left, as I touched on, really, and not going over all ground on that, but we had ambitions to rebrand the club at Swinton. We were looking to, just from a commercial perspective and to capture that Manchester audience, we wanted to just change the branding of the club, really, and brand it up as Manchester Lions rather than Swinton, which wasn't popular and sort of got a negative reaction to a point where we felt we needed to just call it a day and sort of move on, which we did as a board, not just myself. We moved on as an entire board, and I had no intentions, again, like the Leigh thing, you don't really see yourself as I've done my bit now and I'm out, I'm free. It's like that day you get out of jail, innit, and I'm going home. But
you're back in Mallorca with your pint thinking I'm done.
But yeah, I sort of came out of that one, and it was a phone call, because I kept in touch, as we were speaking about the camaraderie between clubs, and I was taking calls from John Flatman up at York and Mark Sawyer at Dewsbury. All these guys, we kept in touch with each other. I actually still attended a few meetings that them guys have, just bits of meetings where clubs keep in touch with each other, and I was sort of still in that loop. And then Steve Kerr, who was chief exec at Rochdale, he still works for us now, Steve. But Steve contacted me and just said, initially sort of span it around a bit of sponsorship, but then pitched a bit of an idea around maybe coming in, and they were a fan-owned club at the time, so it was a sort of society fan-owned model, and he pitched an idea around potentially, if there was a willingness to come in, a takeover, they'd potentially look at a different way of doing things and a new ownership model. So got sold a bit of a vision around that, to be fair, by Steve, and
it's before somewhere.
No, to be fair, there was a lot of potential, and we still see that potential in Rochdale, because it's a big borough in its own right. It's one of the 10 Greater Manchester boroughs, and there's only really there's no real Super League club on the doorstep as such, and there's a strong community game with Rochdale Mayfield there. So we felt that there was some potential, and at that point in time, we thought it was worth having a crack at. We didn't see, if I'm being honest, that within months of taking it on, I don't think any of us saw a global pandemic coming, did we?
No.
So it was obviously that, and then since that point, there's also been central distribution, the Sky monies have reduced. So we've found ourselves with a bit of a challenge on our hands with Rochdale, if I'm honest, and we've had a few issues this last season with our sort of landlord and the stadium football club. We've had a few issues around that, which have created us some problems. So it's been a difficult time, to be honest, since taking it on. But we've sort of we're in a good place, I think, at the moment. We've reevaluated where we were. We've gone for a different route in terms of, you know, the last few years. We've gone for what you'd call instant gravy with some more experienced type players, and your Rangi Chasers, your Fuis, your Sean Penkoviches of the world were been there, done it, senior pros. They all come at a cost, don't they? Whereas this particular sort of new vision under Gary, you know, Gary's been given his remit is to get a young team, get a team that can be developed and grow over the next few years. Really, no major pressure to go out and, you know, we're not tasking him with anything silly. I think they'll set their own goals. We know where we'd like to be, but I don't think anybody's going to be talking us up as favourites or one of the favourites. And I think we just want to have a really competitive team, a young team, and one that gives 100% for the shirt the fans can buy into, and you can see there's potential with it and some development there as well, you know.
Yeah, and see where you end up, mate, isn't it?
That's the one, really. So, we're not setting any silly targets. I think it's all going to be about, hopefully it's a new team, so hopefully they'll gel well. Hopefully we can be competitive, and, you know, if you can get into the playoffs, then you never know what happens in the playoffs then, do you?
That's it, mate, 100%. So I appreciate your vision on the recruitment, and that's changed, but them three characters that you speak about there, they drive, I imagine, standards. They require something to believe in. They need to play for something, I guess. Like, I've had Rangi on, and Rangi really surprised. I don't know what I expected of Rangi, but I didn't expect him to be as humble and modest as he was.
Yeah.
How do you get people like Rangi, Sean, and Fui into the club? And
yeah, I think what I've always found is it's all about who you know, really, and networks and connections. So, you know, your coaches are always instrumental in that, because they'll have in Sean Penkovich's case, he was a good friend of our previous head coach, Matt Callan. So that's how Sean ended up at Rochdale. Fui, I had, again, Fui knew Sean from playing at Workington with him. I knew Fui from a little bit of involvement at previous clubs. So it's always a little bit of who you know and what you know type of thing. And I think Rangi came up really as we'd moved down to West Wales, and we'd actually signed an halfback, a lad called Rob Fairclough. He came over from Swinton with us, and he was going to be a big player for us, Rob. You know, he's a real talent, and he had a serious injury very early on in that first season. So we needed an halfback basically, and we looked at what was available and who was available. We just got wind that Rangi was probably going to be leaving West Wales due to, you know, the travelling and the issues. He wasn't happy there, and we got wind that he might be coming available. And we sort of, we made a few inroads into that. And myself and Matt went and met him at the time, and we convinced him that Rochdale, we had a bit of ambition and we wanted to go places, and we had a good side, and it just needed his bit of magic to put the cherry on the cake sort of thing. And you know, he bought into that, and he came and signed for us, and it was an absolute dream that his debut. I think we were playing North Wales, not West Wales, and in the first 20 minutes, he absolutely ran the show, and he was just, you know, it was like, we've cracked it here. This is going to be the
different gravy.
And he went into a tackle, really innocuous, and caught his arm and snapped his forearm. And that was 20 minutes into his debut. So, you know, that was the kind of look we were having that year. You know, we'd brought in a top championship halfback in Rob from Swinton, who we knew could do a job. And Matt was rubbing his hands when I said I can get Fairclough in. He was like, just let's do it, you know. And we got Rob through the door. 3 or 4 games in, Rob snapped his cruciate ligament and all kinds of other damage in his knee, which it was just an absolute nightmare for the kid. That and you know, really good. Still gutted now when I think about that, because the lad was, you know, it was his first game. Matt had made him captain, and he was running the show, all's going well, and just out of nowhere his knee went give way on him, and so yeah, we had nothing but bad luck, But for bad luck, we wouldn't have had any that year. That's what 21 season.
Yeah.
And we lost Rangi straight away on his debut, and he only literally came back towards the back end of the season, and we actually missed out on the playoffs, believe it or not. We finished 7th. Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't a great season, to be honest, and that was the year where you were on and off with COVID as well, and we started behind closed doors, and
it's horrendous for the business model, mate, isn't it?
Yeah. It was, genuinely. None of this was on the table or the cards at the time we took the club on. You just couldn't have seen it, could you?
No, mate, no. And I don't know why I've never asked anyone this, but do you know what? Say at your level, when someone gets an injury like Rob's, because without being rude to Rangi, it's a 6 to 8 week thing, isn't it? It's like it's pretty generic. How does Rob go about fixing that? Do you help him? Is it NHS job? Is it?
Unfortunately, I mean, it was a difficult time because it does fall under NHS. We don't have the lads at that level, unless they take out private medical insurance themselves, which we advise them to do. They only get the standard cover, the RFL insurances, and we don't have private medical cover. So, it's a difficult one whereby an injury like that, you're literally going on the NHS waiting list. But with Rob, it was really gutted, and he was on a 2-year contract. We took Rob on a 2-year contract, and I had to have, because it became pretty clear that he was pretty much, for the duration of that contract, he was done. He was finished, really.
Yeah.
He tried, Mark of the kid, he tried coming back and played. He wanted to play. He took advice to say that you can't make it any worse. And he tried to play with it at the back end of the year, and he put his hand up for us and tried his best. And, that was a mark of the lad, really, but he wasn't the same because he couldn't, it was impossible to play with that kind of injury. And
his lines are running, and that, for listeners and viewers that don't know, it's very restricted. You're basically a straight line runner, aren't you? You can't pivot, step, and nothing. Yeah.
And to be fair to him, the way he played with that kind of injury was remarkable. Really, he did hold his own, but he wasn't the dynamic little cheeky little halfback jinking about, and he wasn't, he couldn't play his own game. And then it became apparent that obviously he wasn't going to be available for the duration of that contract, and we had to have those difficult conversations around settlements and final agreement with him around that. And it's always, they're not nice conversations to have with lads, because you sort of you're basically admitting between yourselves that you're not going to be able to see out your contract, aren't you? Which at the beginning, when I went and signed him the day we signed him. I felt like it was Christmas, and he was excited about coming to Rochdale. To end the way it did was really sad, and I'm still gutted about that one now, if I'm honest, because when you think about what might have been and how things could be different, a fit Rob Fairclough all that year in 21, I think the season plays out differently. We certainly made the playoffs, and I didn't see anything in that playoff series that we couldn't have beat. So, it's just those little things, isn't it, where even losing Rob, had we kept Rangi fit and he got us in the playoffs, going into a playoff series with a fully fit and firing Rangi Chase, I still think we'd have a chance.
It's a different game. Yeah.
But that's sport, and you can't look back, can you? You've just got to look forward and move on.
That's it. And when we talk about the models change, mate, so you've signed someone that I'm aware of, and with Rugby Union Club are aware of, in Andy Clark, and a few young lads, mate. And does it take much persuading when the young lads are full of it? Because Andy's certainly full of the energy, full of ambition, because he's fit as a fiddle. Again, he's someone that grafts and that, and you've just got to harness that sort of thing, I suppose, and nurture him.
You do, and Andy's name was brought to us. We towards the back end of last season, because we changed coach last year, and Gary Thornton is West Yorkshire based, so obviously previously was coaching Hunslet, and he's been at primarily over at West Yorkshire club, so his player pool knowledge is probably very strong on his own patch over there in Yorkshire, but less so maybe over this side. So I brought in a guy who came along, who I know quite well from the amateur game, and he's been involved. He's an RFL coach, developer, talent ID guy, Jason, and I just said we're looking at going down a different route here. We want to identify some talent over this side of the Pennines and in the local areas. And he came up with he did some work and some talent identification work, and came up with a number of players that he felt could step into the pro game and really step in and prove themselves. And Andy's name was on that list. And he got a few bits of clips and one thing and another, but he said to me, this kid's got a bit of something about him, and worth Gary having a look at. And Gary had a look and said, yeah, let's get him in and have a look. And it's very early days, but I think he, as you say, he's got a bit of something about him. He's got a good step. He's a fit lad, isn't he? And
he is, mate. And he can knock a goal over if you need one as well.
Yeah, he can kick a goal. He's so excited to see where his career goes, And I think that's the commitment from us as a club, is that we want to help develop these lads as well. It's not just giving them an opportunity and throwing him in at the deep end. It's about giving them an introduction to this level, but with a view to establishing themselves, over a number of years really, and becoming. Yeah. I believe that some of these lads can, they can get familiarised with League One this year, and we, can push towards that championship. But seeing it on a number of occasions, whereas we spoke about Matty Ashton, they can have aspirations of Super League. It don't mean you finished at in your early 20s, does it?
Not at all, mate. Not at all. No.
You can still aspire for the top, and you can still get there.
That's it. Yeah, if you just go about your daily business, mate, and be astute and clever with it, and like we've said right through it, probably, to be honest, the mantra of the chat's been hard work and honesty, hasn't it? And
it's been a common theme within this conversation. Yeah. It's two things that if you said to me, write down some key words, what you'd implement in what you do in your day job and you in rugby. I think that honesty, integrity, hard work, they're all the things that you try and preach.
All over it.
You try and put that into your kids. You try and put that into, into everything you do, don't you?
Yeah. So, silly question, really, because we've mentioned it a bit. So, your overall target really is just to be a fit squad, a happy squad, competitive squad, wherever that takes you. You just ride the wave, mate.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, Gary's remit for the job is he's been given half of essentially the playing budget. We've had to, because of other issues and one thing and another, we've had to, we spent top three type money for the last couple of years and had to go at really pushing at the top end of that table, and we've had to pull back on that. So Gary's remit really as a coach is a bit different to Matt's. We're not, don't get me wrong, we've got ambition. We want to be in the mix. But I think where we're going is with there's a little bit more patience, there's a little bit more understanding that it's a new group, it's a young group, and they will need time. And understanding that we're not necessarily, it's not boom or bust in this next 12 months. We want to build a team that can, that can kick on over the next couple of years, whether that be at League One level or hopefully progressing into Championship. But I guess it's not, what I'm saying is it's not Championship or bust. It's not all about we've got to get to Championship, because it's not the promised land anymore, to be honest. When we spoke earlier about staying in it, it was always that £100,000 difference in funding. That's not there anymore.
Right.
It's literally, we're on about 18 grand's worth of funding at Rochdale, believe it or not. Yeah. And the difference is you might get an extra 15, 20 if you go up. So it's not
life-changing, is it? Yeah.
It's not the promised land financially. And, unless you can go in there and really have a good go at it and throw some money at it, you're pointless being in there to some degree, because you've got to go in strong. Keighley are going to go in strong this year. Barrow the year before went in strong, so they built a Championship team, or the basis of a Championship team in League One, and I think that's the way to do it. So what we want to do is we've set that process in motion with the young side. We'll try and build a team that can go into Championship, add value, and stay in there rather than just get up and then think, how do we stay here? It's not good for anybody. It's just proven Workington. They got pretty much, they had a bad year and they bounced, they came straight back down. And I don't think it's good for any club that. I think if you're going into a division, you need to be able to be competitive, don't you? So we want to build a team, and Gary's remit has been, let's get back to square one, get the discipline right, because it was levelled at us that discipline was poor. get the culture right, get everything right, get a good core of young lads in, and then if we need, if we're progressing and we're doing well, we can maybe add to and have a little bit of a roll of the dice. But it's not there'll be sides in there who are throwing money at it this year. We're not one of them. We're going very sensible and sustainably about what we do.
Yeah, living to your means, aiming for longevity, really, mate. It's again, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, that's been forced on us because of the situations, that we spoke about earlier. We've had to do that to sustain the club and make sure we're not putting it at risk. Ultimately, there's a degree of risk in everything you do, but I don't want that risk to, be uncomfortable and I'm not sleeping at night. So we're going about things as sensible as we can and still got that ambition to try and progress.
Top man, mate. So got a few daft questions for you.
Okay, here we go.
So pre-match superstitions, have you got any?
To be honest, I never did really. No, I never. I was probably, because I didn't play into my adult years, I was probably too young really to you're really relatively carefree in your younger days, aren't you, as a junior? So I was never. I do know lads who they wouldn't put the shirt on till they left the dressing room, or there's all these different type of things. But no, it's not something that ever bothered me really. It was just you just wanted. You look forward all week to a game of rugby, and when you're in dressing room, you just want to be on the field. I never thought about anything other than getting out there, really.
What about in the role you're in now, mate? Is there out you do?
I think in terms of superstitions, really, I'm trying to think as we're talking. Really, I've never really thought about it, but I'm sure that there'll be little silly things and things that I do that people will be saying, well, he does that and he does that, but there's nothing coming to mind.
Routine to you. Yeah,
it's more routine for me. What I do, I'm quite sort of set in my ways in that respect. I do things religiously every morning, so I have the same breakfast. I have a cup of coffee with my breakfast at the same time. I sit and check my emails. I jump in the shower unless I've got an arrangement I need to be at. I do the same thing every morning, and I have a bit of a sight. And when I get into office, I sit down. I do the same thing every morning. I'll open my post. I'll do my emails. I'll have a call log that I need to make. So I'm quite regimental in that way, but no suspicions as such. I don't. I don't have any particular colour socks that I need to wear, or
just Wednesdays. So the toughest player you've played with and against, or toughest player you've come across, and the definition of tough is very different for everybody, mate.
It is, and I think what always comes to mind is Paul Sculthorpe. Scully, one of them shoulder injuries we spoke about was a result of being flattened by Scully. So,
Scully.
he actually played, in terms of age, he was younger than us, and he played up years, he was probably hardest. In terms of Scully was tough and hard in every way, they say there's different definitions.
Yeah.
But I think Scully was one who he played tough, he tackled hard, he ran hard, but if it ever sort of A lads A,
he was happy to roll with it, wasn't he?
Yeah. So I think every definition of toughness you could argue Scully was for me, because that's just a personal thing. Having played against him, I've never obviously I didn't progress to professional ranks or anything, but even at them ages when he's at 16, 17 and you're trying to stop him, he was a man then.
It took a bit. Yeah. And an absolute gent as well. I've been
into him now and again, and his brother Danny obviously has got a connection with Rochdale, and really good lads and salt of the earth, rugby people, aren't they?
Yeah. So your favourite away ground, mate?
Funnily enough, I'm not just saying it because we were there, but I always liked we were talking about it at Widnes. I like the old Norton Park. Yeah. I like the old grounds because obviously I know we've moved on and times are different, but
you've grown up in them, Andy, haven't you?
Yeah, the fond memories of the old Central Parks and the Knowsley Roads, the Norton Park. Because we played at Widnes, we had a couple of guests in our box on that day, and Christian Tyra, who played at Widnes, I don't remember Christian.
Yeah.
His lad's with us now. Kean plays for us, so Christian was with us. And he brought Darren Wright with him and was talking about the World Club Challenge, because Darren Wright played in centre, if you remember, against Canberra for Widnes. So we were having a good chat about the old days and the great Widnes teams, and talking about Norton Park and the unique sort of feel it had to it. That old cages that used to come out and you could
bang on it, isn't it?
But again, the Boulevard at Hull, I remember going to the Boulevard, which was, I think, what I liked about them, they were quite intimidating places. So I always like, while people would go, Boulevard, Norton Park, Hilton Park, they weren't the best, but they had character, didn't they, in the atmosphere?
Yeah, like town coliseums, weren't they, basically?
Yeah. I mean, they were
fans wanted blood, didn't they? Fans wanted violence at times.
When you were coming out of likes at Boulevard at Hull, and we were, I used to go up there and watch Leigh, and you were literally chased out of there. You were, people were wanting to get you, didn't they? And I think as a young lad, there's a bit of that sort of adrenaline and that rush. You remember them places more than some of these plush stadiums that you go to now. To be fair, the Sports Village and likes of Widnes's ground now, it's a different place, isn't it? But, for me, Norton Park, I've said it a couple of times on podcasts and things where I've been asked that question, and the old grounds, particularly the Hilton Parks, Norton Parks, etc. I do like the older grounds.
Yeah, right, mate. So if you're out and you've had a few and the mic's in your hand, what you giving us? What karaoke song are you blasting out?
I can knock a tune out now and again on karaoke, and I'll probably go with Mac the Knife. Right. bit of something like that, an old crooner.
And this is a new question. I got asked it when I done mine, and it shocked me a little bit. But what would you say to a younger you now?
I think one thing I would say is with age and maturity, I think you become more patient.
Yeah.
So I'd probably say in my earlier life, I was probably not as patient as what I am now, and everything was 100 mile an hour and had to be done that minute. Whereas, I'm probably a little bit more sort of slow down and think about it now, rather than a bull in a china shop approach. So, I always try and say that to guys who work for me or people I work with when they come storming into meetings and you can see they're having a bad day. I'll always try and just say, slow down, have a minute, go make a brew, have a think about it, and then but you give it 10 minutes, you'll feel a bit differently, And same with emails, you can jump on an email, can't you? And you're quick to respond, and your response sometimes you'll regret if you send it. Whereas
slightly out of context or something, depending on your state. Yeah.
I'll type an email at night now, and I'll go to bed and read it again in the morning. And I'd say probably 5 times out of 10, I delete it rather than send it.
Yeah.
So, lessons learned, bit more, slow down a bit, think a bit more, certainly patient, a lot more patient. That's probably, if I was advising myself as a younger man, I'd probably say, that's what I'd say to myself, slow down a bit, Andy.
I like that, mate. So, if you're happy to, mate, a 1 to 13 of people you've played with or you've come across in your time on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think without doubt we touched on Matty Ashton. It'd have to be my fullback, because for all the reasons we spoke about. He came as a kid wanting an opportunity, walked through the door in January as a young kid wanting an opportunity, and walked out the door in October as a Super League player, and with a significant transfer fee. So I think that's a rags to riches tale, really, that I've been proud to just be associated with and part of. So that's my fullback. Again, Mike Butt, you spoke about on the wing. Just through his honesty, his attitude, his work ethic, and he can play as well. Don't get me wrong; it's not all about that with Mike. I think that year Matty Ashton broke club try scoring records, but he pushed him all the way and scored over 20 tries, and has consistently performed at championship level. So, Butty there, I think in the centres, Chris Hankinson. Chris was at Leigh when I was at Leigh, playing reserves, and he moved on to Barrow and then signed at Swinton. He was at Swinton when I was at Swinton.
Yeah.
So
you had a little insight on him, did you?
Yeah. So he'd been a full-time player, and he was starting thinking about. He moved to Swinton, and he was thinking about careers and what he wanted to do away from the game. And he came and had a sit down with me, and I gave him an apprenticeship. And he came on board at my business as an electrical engineering apprentice, and he was doing that and playing at Swinton, playing well for us at the time. And he ended up on the radar of Wigan. So ended up one Saturday morning. Wigan had a bit of a tough time with injuries, and we got the phone call to say we've been monitoring him with a view to next year, but we're struggling in centres. Is there any chance we can do a deal? So we met Sean Wayne one morning, myself, Chris, Stu Littler. We met Wayne and Chris Radlinski. He signed for Wigan on the Saturday. We met on the Saturday. He signed on the Monday, and he played his debut against St Helens live on Sky on the Thursday night.
Some week that, isn't it?
It was. So we went to the game. Chris Radlinski invited us, and we went and watched his debut. And as I say, live on Sky. So he, from training with us on Saturday morning as a part-time player to nipping across the Stonecross, we met Wayne and Rads. He signed the contract on the Monday morning. We did a deal with them and got reimbursed for his services, and he signed the deal on the Monday morning, and he made his debut on the Thursday.
Proud moment, mate, I've no doubt.
Yeah, it was good to be again. And obviously he was working for me at that time as well, so it was literally I'm ringing his site supervisor up saying Chris isn't going to be in this week, he's signed for Wigan. So we had to work with him on that, and he's shuffled his college around, and I supported him with that process because he had to train full time at Wigan. And but really proud to be involved in his success, and he moved on to Toulouse, had a good season with Toulouse last year, and he's now at Felton. So always keep an eye on how his career's going. And again, family wise, his dad Gary and his mum Paula, really nice people, salt of the earth people, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? Good people, creating good people, if you like. On the centre, Stu Littler, who was at Leigh as a player when obviously I was involved there. I've known him obviously through knowing him around the town for a long time, but he was involved. He was a Leigh player, and we won the Northern Rail Cup in 2013. He played in that game, and then he retired and he went over with Duffs to Swinton, and I ended up going over there, and then he was my head coach. I worked with him as an head coach for a couple of years at Swinton, and again we had some good times together and a bit of relative success with that side. And from keeping him up, he got thrown in at the deep end, Stuart, in 2017. John Duffy left to go to Featherstone, and Stu got the job, and he kept him up in that Oldham game. And then we had a tough season the year after and stayed up. And then 19 was the best season the club had in decades. So I had some good times with Stuart as my head coach over there. And probably on the other wing, there's a kid at Rochdale at the minute. I don't really want to alert too many people to him.
I can mute it here if you want.
Dan Nixon, he came through the Otwood Hall Academy, and he's played the last couple of seasons for us, and he's got all them hallmarks of what we've just spoken about. He's a real honest kid. He's tough as teak. He's brave as anything, not frightened of anything. But key to him for me is his work ethic and his attitude. I see a lot of what I've seen in likes of Mike Butt in young Dan, and I think he will have a chance of moving on to hopefully not for a long while yet, but moving maybe into Championship and outside chance at some stage and maybe playing Super League. So again, I'm probably doing ourselves no favours by highlighting him, but he is a good kid. So halfbacks, Josh Woodsy comes through at Leigh East and is a product of the Wigan system, but fortunate enough, I know Josh and his family, I know his dad Mick, but was fortunate enough to have him on dual reg at Swinton. And it got to a point where we had the difficult year in 2018. It was literally, if Woodsy played, you had a chance of winning. If he didn't, you didn't. He was that good. He was that good. He's now, he was at Newcastle last year. He's just signed at Batley. But again, another kid that, he's absolutely, he's an old school standoff. He's got the John Woods, the Tony Milers in him. You know, he's
Okay. Yeah.
you know, everything, he can do it all in a dinner suit. You know, and kicking game's superb. So Josh, a lot of time for Josh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my 7 would be the lad we touched on earlier, Rob Fairclough. Obviously, it didn't end the way we would have liked to have done it at Rochdale, and didn't go the way we'd liked to have done. But took Rob on loan from St Helens, who was stuck for an half-back. Stu needed an half-back at the time, and loaned him from Saints. And then he was getting released at the end of that season, and we managed to convince him to come to Swinton. And another one who brave as anything, tough as anything, and a proper, what I call a proper scrum half. You know, a cheeky little character who'd, you know, punches above his weight. He'd fight anybody, daft as a grudge. But real good kid. And as I said, probably my biggest regret and my biggest disappointment in recent years is probably the way it ended with Rob, really, because he could have been I think he would have been the difference for us in that 21 season. But forwards, prop forwards, I'd go with Fui. Just because of his, you know, to be fortunate enough to just have him around the place. And, you know, we had some tough times, and Fui always put his hand up, to be fair. And, you know, he was getting on, but he would always try and put his shift in on the field. And great for the younger lads, and some of the young players and the young forwards and middles around, just mixing with Fui and being able to go on the same field as him. You know, a lot of lads, when he was arriving and coming to Rochdale, it was like you were just buzzing to be able to play with him. So similarly for me to sign him, go and sign him, because he came to Leigh just as Derek was signing him at Leigh as I left. So they were doing the work to bring him over from Australia. He'd been over here and based here for the World Cup in 2013, I think it was. So I'd got wind, and I knew Derek told me he was signing him. And then to be able to take him to Rochdale was brilliant. You know, real marquee signing in a lot of ways. I know he was obviously past his best and he was getting on, but in terms of his name and his profile, it was great for what we did as a club in the last couple of years. Uka, number 9.
I'd agree with that.
Number 9, a lad called Anthony Nicholson. I don't know if you remember him. He started at Leigh, so I was obviously involved with him at Leigh Miners products. He went up to Batley, and then he moved to Swinton just as I was getting involved at Swinton around that time. And another one, I ended up on a car journey with him because drugs testers pulled him out, you know, randomly when they pulled, and I drove him home. I waited. Paul Rowley, who was a coach at the time, said to me, "Will you wait with these 2 lads because we want to get the coach moving?" So I drove him and another lad, Ryan Duffy, back from Barrow, believe it or not. And, you know, when you get chatting in the car and you're talking, and he wasn't happy in his career and what he was doing for work, and he was asking a load of questions about what I did and was there any opportunities. I ended up giving him an apprenticeship, and he came on board. He came on board with me at our place, and real good worker, real good grafter, keen to learn. And he was a good player for us at Swinton, but then he served his time, he came out of his time, and then moved to he's over in Australia now. But real good. And again, same theme, good family, good people. His dad Keith and his mother, they're involved at Leigh Miners Rangers, good rugby league people, good family, good upbringing, and great character, you know, cracking lad, real not just in the club but in my business. He was well liked by all the guys as well, you know. So that's Nick.
Also have a bed in Australia if you ever need to go over now, done it?
That's it, that'd be all right. Won't pull my head down, but yeah, my other prop, I'd probably go with Jamie Acton. Jamie was again, he signed at Leigh when I was there, and big angry southerner, big tough lad. He played a little bit at Wigan, he'd gone to Workington, he'd been around a bit, and he came in at Leigh when I was there, and you know, probably not your traditional rugby league type person, player, call it what you will, but a real handful, a real tough lad. And I was fortunate enough to be able to, when he left Leigh, I managed to do a deal to get him over to Swinton. He joined us, and probably another bad luck story, really, because he played that 2019 season. I think he only played 5 times and got a serious spinal injury, which finished him. I still believe to this day his impact on that dressing room, because he came in and changed the way they thought, the mentality. you know, he was an hard lad and a tough lad, and he put that. I think he instilled that into a few younger lads. You know, don't take a back step. Come with me. But you know, we would back off, or we wouldn't sort of, as lads say, rip in or whatever. There's few games that he had with that Swinton side. I think he instilled that mentality in some forwards, and so while he only played an handful of games, he was fundamental that year for me in the cultural side of it, and the, you know, the mentality side. I believe he had a big impact. So yeah, Jamie would certainly be there on me, you know, my best 13 that have been involved with. Second row, Frankie Alton. We picked Frankie. Frankie was in the reserve side at Leigh when I was involved at Leigh, and he went to North Wales and drifted out at pro game. Ended up back at Leigh Miners, not really looking like he was really overly bothered.
Really?
Looking on, and he got himself in good nick. He was enjoying playing back with his mates at Miners, and we brought him in for that 2019 season just for an opportunity on match money. And he came in and ripped it up. I gave him a new contract at the back end of that season on decent, reasonable money for that particular club. And the following season, Featherstone came in for him. He was at Featherstone for 12 months, and OKR snapped him up. He's now playing Super League week in, week out, getting some big raps. Big raps, and he's just playing at World Cup with Ireland. So again, it just shows you there is some hidden gems in that community game if you're willing.
There is, mate. Yeah, definitely.
And work with them as well, you know. So Frankie, the other second row is the lad they call the time bomb, Tommy Goulding. He was another one who he's worked with our business and still does a bit now as a subcontractor now and again. And another Leigh lad, but he played at Rochdale, and he's just a real tough, hard worker. When you talk about that instilling that work ethic, Tommy was just top tattler every week, never missed a tattle, top tattler, hard as nails, never took a backward step to anybody. And I think if you speak to anybody who either played with or against Tommy, you'll never hear a bad word said against him, and everybody just knows him as being that sort of Mr. Reliable. And he used to do half the tackling for that left edge that he was on. And I think he tackled for all
his half back, innit? Yeah.
So anyone who's, I know Ryan Brealey, you know, and like Riddy, who've played with him, will all say, you know, they love playing outside of him or inside of him, whichever it was, because he did that donkey work for him and linked after him. Well, that's Tommy and Frankie as my my second rowers, and then probably as my 13, I'd probably go Sam Hopkins again, another Leigh player. Came through at Leigh East, and he came for a short period and worked for me as well. So most of these lads have done a bit for us. But he came and signed for Rochdale in the COVID year, if you like. So we signed him he left Toronto and played 12 months at Workington, and I mentioned him to Matt, and Matt was keen to get him on board. So we brought Sam in, and unfortunately, again, he only played a handful of games, and COVID wrote the year off. So he was only on a 12-month deal, and we never saw enough of him in a Rochdale shirt. But I think he proved, you know, I had my earlier dealings with Sam, because he came from Leigh East and he was at Leigh. And we actually sold him when I went into Leigh. Wigan bought Sam and paid a fee for him at the time. We sold him to Wigan and then ended up bringing him back on loan.
Yeah. I remember that.
Sam was a good player and probably never maximised his potential. Sam, really, I think, because he was, you know, for whatever reason, he never hit the heights that everybody. I always thought he'd have He did play with the Super League, but never had a full Super League career, and he certainly had all the attributes and the size and everything to do it, but never quite reached the Super League level that we always thought he would do. But yeah, great lad, and that's my 13 really. I think they're all good lads, and first and foremost, they're all good people, aren't they? And on that list, key for me is good people, and they could play rugby as well.